Ethan Smart, the chief security architect, and co-founder.
Absolutely.
For appNovi. Welcome to Black Hat, Nevada. It's
oh man, Hacker Summer Camp. We're out here.
So, what did you expect from Black Hat? This is not your first time, is it?
No, it's not a first time, but I'll say it's the first time that I'm owning a company that's sponsoring it. So that's exciting. We're going to be in the Innovation City, first major conference that we've kind of come out of stealth and said we're gonna sponsor something. We're gonna go have a lot of conversations with other practitioners, talk about our empathy, because we were those guys who sat in that seat and we built a solution to solve the problem we dealt with firsthand. So I'm excited because I'm spending today at I'm going to go over to B-Sides and be there as a practitioner. I took PTO to be a practitioner, and I'm not, just going to spend some time amongst some fellow practitioners, and then Black Hat right into talking about appNovi.
It's funny that you have to take PTO as a co-founder now to actually come back and have a hands-on
and be a security guy. yeah, exactly.
It's funny that because this is something I always ask from people that are in the space when they become management, and how do they keep up with the skill set, right? Because they just after a while you lose touch with what's going on.
Yeah, and some days I feel like I'm more like a Hollywood hacker, like a TV show hacker, where it's like I like to pretend that I'm still one and like put the graphics up and the nice backgrounds, but definitely I get less and less time to spend doing some fun, red teaming or digging into SIMs. But even my home network, I still have Splunk and Elasticsearch running. I got an IDS going, and so I like to keep my skills, all my skills sharpened, and still be a practitioner, because it's the true love. I'm built appNovi. I know this is somewhat tangential, but built appNovi to solve a problem I dealt with firsthand, and built a software that I was like, how do I gamify this so it's something that I enjoy using and that other security engineers and analysts will love using? So it's a pleasure. I love what I do.
And it's a great segue, because you have a really cool story on how you got started. I personally know it. I don't know if you can share it, for other people to,
So when I started, I was, there's the whole, I go all the way back to high school where, and I would find it hilarious if any of the alumni follow up with me on like LinkedIn or post to validate this, but I was actually changing the homepage in our computer lab to a credential harvester for Facebook, and using some Metasploit framework or tool at the time, and some tool in Kali Linux, or I think it was Backtrack back then, and I harvested a bunch of my fellow high school students' Facebook pages. I changed some of their profile pictures, and was kind of how I got my started. And this is really cool. And then I started working at my college at Trinity up in Chicago in the IT department, and set up Wireshark on the admin VLAN, which I wasn't supposed to have access to, and started sniffing and found some credentials. And so security, like right away, was just this thing I loved digging into, and it was like, this is so fascinating and fun, and I probably maybe shouldn't be doing this, but I took the proper disclosure steps for the college, and then ultimately was working in IT after that, doing some night shift stuff. You and I talk about this over beers or whatever all the time, and went out to Applebee's with a friend of mine, and her and I are just catching up, and we were just getting to know each other, and she said, well, what do you want to do with your life? And I go, I just want to get into cybersecurity. And she goes, well, you're just saying that. And I go, what do you mean I'm just saying that? I'm not just saying that. This is what I'm passionate about. And she goes, well, my dad's the CISO of McDonald's. And so I got connected to Mark Varner, who's now the CISO of Lowe's. He gave me my first really chance into a formal InfoSec role. And if Mark listens to this, I owe an insane amount of my career to you, really getting me started in security, my first formal role. And Ed Gorski worked under there. He's still over at MCD, and just some really awesome guys helped and gals helped mentor me from there.
So the lessons learned here is that you never know what's going to happen at Applebee's at 12 o'clock in the morning.
Half-price apps, amazing things happen, whether it's InfoSec or friendships or who knows what else. Yeah, it's an incredible time.
And I read somewhere where things always happen when people start leaving. It's like that's how it is. That's why you have to stay at the after hours.
Yeah, just stay at maybe there's probably some mythology. I feel like RSA, it's late night Denny's. And maybe Black Hat, we gotta make some, mysticism around Applebee's at Black Hat, maybe.
So you became a practitioner in cybersecurity. Talk to me about kind of the early days and how you came across a problem that at the time nobody solved.
Yeah. So what I think is somewhat funny is we, as a security space, particularly in the vendors, we went and solved all the problems that were after the core foundation, really with some assumptions that some of the core foundation was done. And then, so there's one problem I'll kind of talk about there, and then another which is a little bit more advanced. But the first start I got into the problem that I wanted appNovi to solve goes all the way back to me logging into a SIM back in my McDonald's days and looking at all these rows and rows of IDS alerts. And I was looking at them and I'm like, well, I got to dig through millions of rows of alerts for me to try to comprehend what's talking to what and what do I really care about. And so that was the first step, was a visualization problem. And then the second part of that is when I was looking through rows and rows, what I was stuck with was IP addresses. And IP addresses don't really tell you a lot of information. And even if you look at how many other tools did I have to log into to figure out what is this box? Sometimes it was a DNS query, right? Sometimes it was looking in ServiceNow or a management tool. Sometimes it was looking in our endpoint security tool.
And it was a fairly large network, right?
Yeah, definitely. And so all those pivot points in investigation just to answer basic contextual questions like, what is this box? Who owns it? Is it part of a crown jewel application? If I take this offline in an investigation, am I going to cause revenue impact? Or is this the cafeteria server menu and it's safe for me to take offline? And so the two problems that we solve at appNovi that I built around even those early day problems was visualization around security data and asset attribution. Because those are two really core problems that plague security. And what appNovi does is, not to transition right into kind of appNovi, but what it really does is aim to solve by plugging into all your existing tools, not an agent, not a scanner, very flexible, right? Take all that data and visualize it out. So we say a picture's worth 1,000 rows. It's really more like a picture's worth 1,000,000 rows at this point we've seen. And then solving asset attribution. You know right away when you're looking at an alert on a box, who owns it, who's logging into it, what does the business silos say, what does the application silos say of is this part of a crown jewel app or not? Putting that right at the analyst's fingertips.
And, the majority of the people, I would say, 98 out of 100 would just, deal with the problem and say, okay, well, there's nothing else we can do. Let's just, figure it out, and maybe move to another company because we don't want to do this anymore. What made you, in particular, just decide to create your own business and jump into the deep end?
Yeah. So I met my co-founder, Joe Schreiber, who's one of the first people that we looked at the world the same way. And not to get too kumbaya, right? But it's very rare you
go ahead. This is the place for it.
He's the man. No,
let's hold hands.
Yeah. Let's just hold hands. Let's light a campfire and get in trouble in the podcast studio for lighting a fire. So I met Joe, and we met at our first gig, which was Tufin, right, an Israeli network security policy management company. And he and I think, bonded over the future is software-defined networking, and everyone thought we were crazy. Afterwards in this meeting, he and I were debating everyone on this stuff. And some people thought it was way, way down the road, and we were like, no, it's coming. And afterwards I go, hey man, you and I just disagreed with the whole room. Very rare I find someone to do that with me. And then we started talking, and we were like, wow, we're both ex-SOC analysts. We're both developers of micro tools in an organization. We went to another startup together where solving some interesting challenges, but I think all along when we were talking, there was still that passion for solving that specific problem around asset attribution and visualization for the SOC that we shared a deep passion for. And so I don't think I would have done it alone. I think I would have kept going to other companies, but when you meet someone else that validates that problem space for you, and you're both passionate about wanting to go solve it, that really is kind of the ignition it took for us to say, yeah, let's go for it. Let's go start appNovi.
So you were hands-on, knee-deep into developing the product, right? At what point in time you decided, okay, we're ready to launch, and to say you're supposed to be ashamed of the first MVP.
Yeah, if you're not embarrassed of your first release, it's classic, right? If you're not embarrassed of your first release, then you release too late. And so a lot of stories we could talk about of, Chris Holden, the CISO of Crown Forster, is a friend of mine. He sent me this meme video of founders doing their first deployment. And it's this these two guys taking forever to manually set up this rig or something like that. And it's true, our first deployment was us totally troubleshooting each install. Thankfully, it was a design partner that we were very comfortable with, and they knew what to expect. And even then, actually, I would say it went better than we thought. He said, wow, this was the easiest install of all my vendors. And we were like, okay, we'll totally take that, because to us, it felt very manual. But when we started, we picked probably 4 or 5 different design partners that we were very comfortable with, that we called up and said, hey, we remember working with you in our past. We think you have this problem. Could we come solve it for you? And they said yes. And so we were very lucky that we had some people in the in organizations that were passionate about solving the problem we knew they had, validated for us that the broader market still has this problem. And we're able to refine kind of those early product iterations for us. That was really key.
And how do you deal with the complexity of the common enterprise with all these disjointed systems out there? When you first deployed, what was kind of the secret sauce between getting appNovi up and running and connecting to all those disjointed systems?
Great question. So this maps to where we took that both a technical challenge as well as a political challenge, and Joe and I took it as a challenge, I guess, directly for us to build a solution around. And so we knew that there was this problem of data being, much like my hometown in Normal, Illinois, there's a bunch of silos. It's not farm silos, it's data silos. And different people own those silos, and they're very, very cautious about who they want to give access to on that data. But it's critical for both security functions as well as business functions, enabling digital transformation, cloud migration, all those things. And also all those different things speak a different language, but underneath you probably can get to probably a CSV or XML or JSON. And so when Joe and I went, we didn't want to be another company that built these black box data connectors that you enter your username and password or API credentials and you walk away. We're going to just take the data, and if you want to change how we process that data, what data we touch, open up a request for enhancement, right, an RFE, or open up a support ticket and hope that in a few quarters we fix it. We said no to that, right? So we built a way where all of our integrations are open to our users. There's an in-product IDE where advanced users can look at the data we are grabbing, how we're transforming it, and they themselves can write their own connectors to new data sources or make edits to the connectors that we have so that we can take data from anywhere. It was really something we were passionate about that we wanted to infuse in the product early on even.
And it's so interesting because you'd think that companies will have reporting in place. They have NetFlow data, they have different the firewall. Everything basically spits out this data, right? So if you did not have appNovi, what would would the day-to-day look like? How do you correlate between all this, among all those systems?
So this is not news to any practitioner. It's not news to you. It's not news to me. there's never expanding attack surface. And really what that means is you have on-prem, you have cloud, you have virtualization, you have physical, you have IoT. And then you have all those security controls. If anyone goes to Black Hat and looks at the expo hall, right, a lot of vendors, and those vendors are deployed in all these companies. So, and they're all, like you said, spitting out tons and tons of data. And so what Joe and I were given with back when we were practitioners, and what most teams are stuck with today, is to take all that data and put it into some data lake like a SIEM, maybe a Splunk, Elasticsearch, and you have some really great advances in data lake with Snowflake. I think they're doing really interesting things. I tell people all the time, go talk to Omer over at Snowflake. But even then, it's great you can centralize that telemetry and data in a lake, but then what do you do with it, right? How do you correlate it in a meaningful way? And what we build in appNovi is what we call cross-domain intelligence. So without it, you're digging through mostly event data, like mostly telemetry data, like flow and maybe some metadata from the tools, but no clear way to really correlate other than just event and event. So you could do things like impossible travel. You can do things like, I see an IDS alert here, and I see another telemetry from my EDR agent, and oh man, 2 alerts, let's merge it into another mega alert. But there's all this correlation you can't do with that data. You can't take vulnerability metadata as well as an endpoint agent data and say, here's what my Rapid7 scanner sees or Tenable sees versus what Sentinel-1 sees very easily in a SIEM. You can't really visualize the data because it's really just a data table or the equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet of scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And so what practitioners are stuck with is tons and tons of data, not an efficient way to visualize it and dig through it, not necessarily an easy way to report on it or alert on it, and not really an easy way to do some basic this tool versus this tool or share intelligence with 2 different things. And so when we say cross-domain intelligence, right? What we mean is it's great you have a vulnerability scanner. Mm-hmm. It can tell you exactly what has a critical vulnerability. It's great you have NetFlow. You can understand what is internet exposed or firewall logs. You can see what's internet exposed. It's great you have an endpoint agent and you know what assets have that endpoint agent. But what we do in cross-domain intelligence is we can say, not only here's what has a critical vulnerability, but here's what has a critical vulnerability and is internet exposed and has exploits available and is missing your EDR agent of choice, right? And we look at, throw in the business silo and say, also that's part of a crown jewel application. You should go prioritize that thing. So bringing in a new layer of cross-domain intelligence that is really only possible in using a tool or solution like appNovi.
So a lot of issues with existing tools these days, like the SIEM tools, it's always after the fact, right? Left of boom or I guess right of boom. What can you do using all that correlation data to be proactive about the security controls as opposed to trying to figure out what had happened already?
Yeah. So the number one thing that we talk to our customers about as a foundation of what we do is security control validation. And it's not necessarily us doing something that some of those attack simulation tools do or any of that. It actually really boils down to when we look at all your technology stack, we can find very quick findings. When you plug in AWS credentials and you plug in your vulnerability scanner, we're going to tell you right away what you're missing vulnerability data on.
Can you maybe provide an example for people that are not familiar with? Because I'm sure in existing deployment, you've probably seen all kinds of stuff. So, and people remember stories. So if you have a couple of stories of what happened when people start seeing all that correlation.
Fantastic story around that. So one of our largest deployments and one of our earliest deployments, we started with taking a small subset of data. First, it was an AWS deployment. They were running Sentinel-1. And they were running Tenable for vulnerability management. And they were not
And by the way, that's kind of almost like a typical, right? It's a typical, Sentinel-1 and AWS. It's like, it's typical.
Yeah, those are two best practice security tools that everyone should have or one of the ones that you should be selecting. And they told us, we're pretty sure, something you never want to hear security teams say. When they say pretty sure of something, you're like, okay, buckle up for this POC, because pretty sure is not, like, hope is not a strategy, all right? Let's take a look at this. And so we plugged in their AWS environment, and right away there was findings. Even before adding any other data, he goes, your tool's wrong. There is way too many VPCs here. We do not have this many VPCs or infrastructure running.
So for people not familiar with VPC, just define
the equivalent of a data center in AWS, right? Okay. And so he said, your tool's wrong. It's adding in extra data. My co-founder Joe goes, listen, man, we don't put any fake data in there. I don't know what you want me to tell you. What's in there is in there. We didn't make that stuff up. And I'm paraphrasing to make it more clean for for the podcast.
PG.
Yeah, more PG. And he goes, listen, we don't make this stuff up. We don't put fake data in there. And as he started looking, we were able to take in other telemetry sources to not just say that infrastructure is there, but I can tell you who in your organization is logging into that infrastructure, spinning up that infrastructure, spinning down that infrastructure. And so he was able to understand, again, all about adding in asset attribution, not just there's a thing there, but who owns that thing probably, at least based on telemetry, right? Not just ServiceNow or service management. And so there was value right away. Then we got into the...
And by the way, so that VPC sprawl, that happens all the time, right? It's so easy, and I think it's almost by design. Amazon AWS has, the controls on it almost like, a little finicky, where the fact is you spin something up and then you forget about it. You have to look at different screen depending on the geographical areas. Yeah. It's almost like they want you to leave this on by design and create that sprawl because, you make more money by having these on, right?
It could be.
Yeah. Conspiracy theory.
Yeah. It's a good conspiracy theory. A lot of respect for Bezos and team over there at Amazon, right? I can't speak to their billing practices. There's some best practice stuff.
And the reason you care is because if you leave these on, you are most likely you forgot all about the controls or whatever they have in place, and it's very common to leave one of these on and then it's data leakage and so on.
So absolutely, and it's more than just about a billing problem. It's about an attack surface problem, because the attack surface is the broadest it's ever been, right? Because you have so much of this easy to turn on environment. I mean, it's as simple as saying, here's my credit card, and spinning up, servers for any developer, and they can throw who knows what data is going out there, right? It used to be, I won't say where I was working at the time, Shadow IT was, we were looking at, NetFlow data, and we found this thing being really noisy, and it was some guy.
Isn't it amazing? They don't call it Shadow IT anymore.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is.
At the time it was, oh my gosh, you have a file share under your desk with financial data you're offloading to there. Like, what are you thinking? That was, oh my gosh, Shadow IT. And now you have so much sprawl, just like you said, that's so uncontrollable because it's so easy. It's a click of a button. It's click here to, even without a credit card, you can get Amazon credits or Azure credits or GCP, right? And you're off and running for free.
So coming back to the story, they found it and they managed to take action on it right away, right?
Definitely, right, yeah. So there's giving the visibility, there's giving not only visibility, but I say visibility is such a overused word at this point in the marketplace. Visibility is like a commoditized space. And so you have to go way beyond just saying, here's a thing. And that's why asset attribution is so important to us. It's more than just here's a thing. It's here's who owns it. Here's what you should go do about it, right? Taking that actionable step, making findings actionable. Right, and I think
So that kind of brings me back to what you just said. It's like, okay, I know there's something there, but who does it belong to? Yeah. What is the function? What is connecting to, and so on? Because you mentioned specifically that you were the practitioner. They didn't know whether you should turn something off.
Yep.
And what it's going to do to the infrastructure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, that was a core thing. Like, first, you plugged in a source, and we found value. And at the time, it was we were bootstrapped cybersecurity company to start, and so it was a team of just Joe and I, and I think we were very proud, we were very proud that as a team of two in one of our first deployments, we were able to find a finding like that. And where it got way more interesting was back to the pretty sure, one of the most dangerous things I think you can say in InfoSec, where he said, we're pretty sure we have good coverage. And when we plugged in Sentinel-1, when we plugged in Tenable, we were able to very quickly identify, not only did you know about this attack surface, because like I think you said this before, we started saying this, it's more than just about billing, like finding rogue IT about billing and consumption. It's also about attack surface, because if as security team, I know this is way oversaid, you can't protect what you can't see, but if the security team doesn't know about that, and there's no good hygiene on endpoint protection, on vulnerability management, it's a whole nother area of your business you're vulnerable to.
You know, it's almost a moment like where, you know, the CISO, whomever that is, sees it, and then they get up and walk out the door. They leave the room, right? It's like that kind of moment.
Yeah. I have some more dramatic stories in my past at other startups where, like, you know, like installing, like back in the McAfee days, like installing an IDS and like literally watching a CIO go and unplug servers out of a rack, right? And maybe appNovi will get to have one of those stories someday where I'm physically seeing people unplug stuff in a data center, but not yet. We'll get there. But yeah, definitely it is a moment where when you realize what the attack surface is, which is really the first step in where we want to take our customers, is it's not just a service management use case of understanding assets. It's really about understanding attack surface. Like, where is it? You know, what's exposed, what's not. And again, when we plugged in those other sources of data, that's where you get cross-domain intelligence, not just AWS and who's spinning stuff up, who owns it, but when you overlay Tenable data, all of a sudden you see how those things are vulnerable, what's unscanned, that you don't even know what is vulnerable, how vulnerable it is. Now you really get a picture of attack surface, because not only is that stuff being spun up without you know about it, internet exposed, but it's also crazy vulnerable. And then when you grabbed in Sentinel-1 data, you could see some of that stuff either had an agent and was infected and was going untouched because practitioners didn't know who owned it. They were too afraid to take action on it. I mean, that's crazy when you're looking at organizations that have all these advanced tools and are too afraid to act on security data because lack of context. That's what gets Joe and I up in the morning. You know, that's what gets us juiced up to stay up until whatever a.m. in the morning and wake up and go help teams, because that context is huge. It's critical.
And since inception, you start adding additional functionality. So first of all, you have tons of integrations today, right? But you also added the ability to almost like be preemptive and create these almost like you know, if this then that, like just to showcase, like, okay, you know, to monitor certain areas of the infrastructure for certain. So I think for Log4j specifically, for example, talk to me about that.
So Log4Shell came out, I want to say almost a year after SolarWinds. I could be wrong, but I think SolarWinds was the first, like, whoa, like supply chain risk and all, and we really need to understand our attack surface, right? Now, the thing about SolarWinds was that it was pretty contained because it was a commercial product. And so you knew, yes, we own SolarWinds as an internal application. Maybe we don't know what it's plugging into. Maybe we don't know what the sprawl was. I mean, excuse me, maybe the blast radius was post right of boom. Where Log4Shell was unique was people had no clue where it was in their infrastructure, because it's Log4j, because it's a library and developers could add it to an application whenever they wanted. It was core part of Apache, right? So people generally didn't understand where it was in their infrastructure. So this is a true story, we had a number of customers and existing deployments say, hey, don't worry, we reached out proactively and said, hey, we help identify everywhere it is. They said, we already know we don't have Log4j, it's all good. We're laughing at the rest of the teams dealing with it. And we said, well, let's just take a look. So we logged in, we gave these out-of-the-box dashboards and what we call composition rules, a key part of, like you said, where we advanced. It's more about data, more than just data visualization. It's about querying that in a repeatable, user-friendly way, make that data accessible. So we came in and said, just plug in these rules, just plug in these dashboards, and we'll really know, right? It's no more unknowns for us is a really key thing we talk about. And so when we did that, we had 3 different customers and 1 design partner where once we plugged that in, they said, oh my gosh, we need to go. We need to go right now. Like we had no idea we had this. Not only do we have it, but it's internet exposed, and so we helped prioritize not just where it was, but also helped prioritize who owns those machines in your organization, because we're taking in user telemetry. Here's where those things were internet exposed because we were taking in firewall logs, and so we enabled our customers in an unparalleled way that very few other companies had, to not only understand where it was, but that asset attribution of who owned that infrastructure, whether or not it was publicly exposed or not. Those are questions practitioners at other companies had to log into SIMs and look at networking data and send forms out and manually ask app owners, are you running log4j? I mean, there's people still dealing with that we responded to in minutes.
Yeah.
Minutes.
And a lot of it, I think, was like a little bit of almost like a gut feel. Like it was like, okay, let me see, I think I know where it is, and so on. And I think prioritization is a really key aspect of it, especially when you lack resources, you have all these things you have to deal with. So where do I know what to do first? It's all about minimizing risk and do it as quickly as possible at the limited budget, really.
Yeah, we took this from one of our customers, where one of the VPs of InfoSec said, what appNovi really helps me do is shorten the time between knowing something's wrong and knowing what to do about it. And I think that summarizes very well what we've been able to do and provide to security teams is shorten that time. And that's something Joe and I wanted to solve from the beginning, and it's great to be solving it now at scale.
So talk to me a bit about how so somebody who's listening to this say, wow, this is great. Like, I have all those projects that I have to work with. Sometimes I have a hard time coming back to, asking for additional budget.
Yeah.
How do you set your stage for practitioners because they want the tool.
Yeah.
And, so how do you set the stage for them to ask for, for funding for this particular product, and where do you see the value right away, and can they potentially remove other tools or consolidate or do some other things with existing budget that they have?
Yeah, I think most commonly when we've gone and talked with teams, what we have found, particularly we were, I guess, a unicorn in our own way, not the $1 billion valuation, but a unicorn in our own way, that we started with 5 of the largest companies in the US as first customers. And when we went and talked with them, and as we've gone into those deployments, what we have found is that it's not replacing always a direct tool, because no one's built appNovi before. But what people have built is some custom app on top of their Splunk, or some custom tool.
And you've seen that quite a bit, right?
Oh, it's unreal how much we've seen.
Which shows you exactly where the need is. If somebody goes ahead and make the investment of building their own home brew.
Yeah, I find it comical thinking that I was unique and that I had essentially built versions of appNovi at my prior companies using Python and other things. I find it so comical that as we've gone to market at scale and talk to practitioners, how many companies are trying to solve this themselves. And it's been a hilarious and fantastic light bulb moment as we've gone out and said, and Joe and I said in the beginning, how has no one solved this yet? We are not these brilliant, like Einstein guys who are rolling out some miracle artificial intelligence. This is a very practical problem
but
to solve.
You know how it is. After the fact, it was like people like, why didn't I do it before?
Yeah.
It's like, it's like the ShamWow or the thing for the car, to block the sun from the windshield. It's like, how can I not make this up myself?
Yeah, I laugh all the time because Joe and I essentially built SOAR platforms before SOAR platforms were commercially available by ourselves. And then after the SOAR platforms went to the market, Joe and I just looked at each other. I remember having this conversation at Tufin where we both were like, wait, why did we not build that then? And so in many ways, when we built appNovi, it was the most common sense thing. And it's been great as we've gone and seen so many people trying to duct tape these half-built solutions together. It is very validating.
So you basically just decided not to have that happen to you again.
Oh, absolutely. You know? Yeah. We were no SOAR 2.0 happening to us for sure. We didn't want that happening.
So what is it, like a platform as a service, an appliance, Kubernetes? What is it?
So we offered in two options. Again, back to our practitionership. Some people don't want data going back home. They want to own it, and so we can deploy as just a Docker package in your own environment, and we don't need your data. So that helps us if we go to agencies in particular. Some of the top financial institutions have their gold images that they want their own software deployed on, so we offer that. Then we also offer SaaS, self-hosted, because when you go at scale to more of the just certain size enterprises, sometimes it's the top of the market, sometimes it's the middle. People just don't want to manage servers anymore, and we solve for that too. So offering both was something we were passionate about doing.
And do you have to get like storage, because you are looking at all that data? Do you have to manage that? How do you deal with large scale infrastructures?
Yeah, that's a nice thing you get to choose. If you want, we can take it all off your hands with SaaS, or if you want to manage it yourself, you can architect it however you want. We've been deployed, it cracks Joe and I up. We've been deployed in physical rack and stack servers. We've been deployed in GCP, AWS, VMware, Nutanix, Azure, wherever you want to spin it up, and however you want to manage the storage. It could be in AWS, something elastic. It could be a true SSD if you want. You can manage it yourself on premise, or you can hand it to us, and we scale all the time on your behalf.
And are you transparent about the cost or the investment, should I say, in terms of because Splunk was notorious for charging folks for the data, and then I'm assuming you don't charge extra for connectors and all that.
So I am a Splunk fan. I like those guys, but we certainly took a different approach with the licensing model. Mm-hmm. We didn't want to limit users from adding all the critical data sources that makes appNovi so useful. Again, key thing is cross-domain intelligence. Sure, we could just add AWS, and you can find some findings. We talked about that. Time to value is certainly instant from that perspective. But what we really are passionate about doing is no one's going to solve AWS problems better than AWS. But AWS cross-domain intelligence with Tenable, with SentinelOne, with all those other vendors out there, ExtraHop, that's the value we want to provide. So we didn't want to do an EPS approach because it limits practitioners from adding data. So the value that we feel we provide, or the unit we feel we provide value around is the workload. So we charge per workload and not per IP. If there's multiple IPs and multiple interfaces going into one workload, it's still one workload. We know how to be smart about that. And so that's how we ultimately have charged our customers.
And what does it typically fall under in terms of projects? Because enterprise always have these project, and sometimes it's a multi-year project to solve certain issues. What does it fall under?
So
is there a magic quadrant right now?
So we view ourselves as a cybersecurity mesh solution. We are neighbors to Chasm and a few other things, and so there is some very small overlap. We've actually integrated with some of the Chasm vendors at some of the top of the market because we're very interested about connectivity of data and taking in Splunk's data and combining it with all those things. So,
and what's their what's in it for them? With all those Chasm, some of these companies, those vendors, they want you to create those connectivity, right?
Yeah.
There's a certain benefits for using appNovi and using the service? What is it?
Yeah, we've talked about a maturity. We talk about our maturity model in CyberMesh. It starts with asset management, and that's like the first 10% of what we do. And then it starts with connectivity of data, adding in telemetry, network exposure, a bunch of Splunk or any SIMS data, right? Sumo Logic is a fantastic data source. Bringing in all that telemetry and then bringing in your VMDR or any other vulnerability management solution, identity and application silos. So for us, we want to take customers on this journey of full connectivity and instant context across multiple silos of data. And so there is kind of, we view Chasm really as a cousin, right? We are doing some of the things at the asset level, but we'll take their asset data. It's great. Like, happily integrate with them and then marry in all these other silos, putting it into the visual workspace for context and action. So yeah.
And what about the day-to-day, administration of the tool? Is it what's the learning curve there?
Yeah, we are all about making security data accessible. If you want to use appNovi, it's as simple as logging in, and you can choose. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure. Mm-hmm. Are you a business user who wants a dashboard every time you log in, or are you a security analyst who needs a workspace and you want to do, go look for specific security events, be presented with that right away? Are you a threat hunting analyst that wants?
So can you customize depending on who the customer, who consumes that data?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, and that's core for us, right? Some people are exploratory data analysis type of people, and some people want to be presented right away with, this is the thing you need to alert to. But also from our experience, sometimes our users aren't the ones always logging into appNovi. They have a workflow in ServiceNow or a SOAR or some other tool they're using, and we are all about enriching those things, enriching SOAR platforms with graph context and all the different things. We can provide that as well. So enriching all the other tools, making them more intelligent is absolutely a key function of appNovi. You don't have to be logged in every day to our console to extract value from it.
So what's the future holds for appNovi?
Oh man, yeah. We want to keep empathizing with practitioners. Again, kumbaya moment. Sure, we could shed some tears or something. We are ex-practitioners who are trying to solve the problems that we had and that practitioners deal with today. And so we're going to keep empathizing and keep listening to the practitioners on solving problems at scale. Asset attribution is definitely a core thing we're solving for today. Visualization's another thing. And what we've been doing is listening to our users and customers on the problems that they're dealing with, and we have some really exciting things coming out, certainly around data science and AI, that's going to be the most open and transparent that I think the market's ever seen, and very, very passionate about no more black boxes. So great stuff coming. We're excited. So
maybe next time a Black Hat, you'll be kind of the main floor. You're going to move from the innovation center to, maybe.
Maybe. I like the Innovation City. It's where I used to hang out with as a practitioner because it's some of the new and fun stuff. Maybe we'll have a giant booth with like some hack the planet spinning globe in the sky. Who knows? I'm here for the journey, and we'll see whatever's next.
So Ethan, what's the easiest way for people to reach out to you for to know more and potentially even look closer into appNovi?
Yeah, so feel free to reach out to us, ethan@appnovi.com. You don't have to, nothing magic about it. Feel free to ping me there. Reach out on LinkedIn. It's Get Smart, not 007, right? Because I like to say my life is more like a blooper reel than a final cut. So I always liked Maxwell Smart. But feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, Twitter. We're on Reddit, posting the best and latest memes that we can think of and come up with. All the channels.
Awesome. Thank you very much for coming, and looking forward to hanging out tonight at the After Hours party.
Looking forward to it.
Take care.